My friends, today we're going to talk about the Battle of Huliaipole. You probably don't know where it is, but it's the next hotspot of the Ukraine war. Huliaipole is located 100 kilometers southwest of Pokrovsk, along the Zaporizhia front line. The problem is that the Russian 5th Combined Arms Army has already advanced nearly 20 kilometers since September, and has now taken this strategic city into a cauldron. Huliaipole is strategic because it's the only town of this size in a 35-kilometer radius. If Huliaipole falls and nothing is done, Russian forces will be able to flank the entire Zaporizhia front line, and perhaps even fulfill this prophecy. The current situation is truly critical, and I'm not making this up. This is what TSN Ukraine reported. Front on the brink of disaster. Meanwhile, on Telegram, Ukrainian journalist Ternenko said, "We're heading towards a catastrophe of strategic scale that could lead to the loss of statehood. The question of when Russian tanks will enter the hypothetical Zaporizhia or Dnipro is only a matter of time." So this is the decisive battle we will analyze today. And I seriously advise you to buckle up, because you will see a lot of flag raises.
Leave me alone!
Haters will say this is all AI. Oh yeah, talking about this. We all know AI is reshaping the job market rapidly. Nearly half of workers worldwide fear unemployment due to AI and technology. Customer service, marketing, software, finance. No industry is untouched. But the real issue is that people are still living in a bubble. They still think they won't get affected until it hits them like a truck. Now I want you to make a smart choice this Black Friday. While most people are spending on things that lose value, the smart ones are investing in learning what's shaping the future. Which is why I have teamed up with Outskill to bring you a 2-day live AI Mastermind training. They're hosting a 2-day live AI Mastermind workshop this Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Now usually this is a paid training worth $395. But Outskill is running their big Black Friday sale and offering all of my viewers a free seat in the training. I highly recommend you to attend this workshop, because not only do you get AI certified, but you will also learn how to use AI-powered workflows, use AI tools, and potentially launch businesses generating close to $5,000 in weekly revenue. It is rated 4.9 out of 5 on Trustpilot, and you get trained by expert mentors from companies like Microsoft, Nvidia, OpenAI, Google, and more. People who have built and shaped the current AI landscape. In just 16 hours, you will learn 10 plus AI-powered tools, master AI in Excel sheets and presentations, start building your own AI agents and workflows, and even join a community of AI builders inside their seamless learning dashboard to meet like-minded people and collaborate with them lifelong. But wait, there's more! If you attend both days, you'll unlock bonuses worth $5,000, including a prompt Bible, a roadmap to monetize AI, and your own personalized AI toolkit. So if you're already planning your exciting weekend, trust me, nothing's more exciting than planning your future. Save your free spot now via the link in the description below before seats vanish, and join their WhatsApp community so that you never miss a beat. As a historical reminder, Huliaipole is inseparably linked to anarchist leader Nestor Makhno. This town in Zaporizhia Oblast was his birthplace and the de facto capital of the anarchist revolutionary insurgent army of Ukraine that he led until the ultimate Bolshevik victory in 1921. As you can imagine, this city has a massive symbolic value for Russian forces. That is the victory of Moscow over an independent Ukraine. Alright, so this is the current situation around Huliaipole. Russian forces formed a cauldron around it, and foreign elements are less than 5 kilometers away from the first houses of the town. Ukraine could only muster various territorial defense battalions to defend the place. Meanwhile, to the north, the main supply road has been cut off. Yeah, well, it's not looking good. You still have time to pull out your bet, okay? I mean, just look at this. Huliaipole is only composed of small homes, while being located on flat, open terrain. At the same time, this random town of Huliaipole is the largest urban area in a 35-kilometer radius. Just like what happened with Vuhledar, Velika Novosilka. Once the strong point fall, nothing can stop Russian forces until the next strong point. So the loss of such a defensive node would severely compromise the defense of Zaporizhia Oblast for Ukraine. But to fully understand how we even got to this disastrous situation, we have to go back to the starting point of the Huliaipole campaign, September 2025. This was the frontline situation along the Zaporizhia and South Donetsk fronts on September 1st. Here's Huliaipole, the focus of today's video. Here's Velika Novosilka, which the Russians captured on the 28th of January 2025. And here's Orikhiv, the main supply hub from where Ukraine launched its 2023 summer offensive. If we zoom in, there are two roads supplying Huliaipole, the TO814 road going to the west, and the main one, the TO401 going northwards and running parallel to the Yanchur River. In my previous video from November 2024, the main question was in what direction would Russian forces advance? They could flank Pokrovsk from the west, flank the entire Ukrainian defensive lines in Zaporizhia from the east, or they could even start pushing towards Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Now we have our answer. Russian divisions ended up pushing westwards, completely bypassing Pokrovsk. But then on the 4th of July, I also said the following. Although in the past few weeks the Russians have launched small attacks along the Zaporizhia front, but nothing serious. I see shaping operations for a potential future offensive, but this can only start once the South Donetsk Oblast is fully conquered. And this is literally the situation we're facing right now, with all of South Donetsk now under Russian control. But you see, the arch of the Vovcha River was defended by dozens of Ukrainian mechanized brigades. However, the Velika Novosilka Huliaipole axis was only defended by territorial defense units, namely 3 entire territorial defense brigades, supported by another 3 individual battalions of Ukraine's territorial defense. As you can see, Huliaipole was poorly defended, and it presented Russia with a unique opportunity to outflank the entire Zaporizhia line. Like Zelensky advised in chapter 24, when trying to reinforce a faltering battle line, make sure to isolate all your poorly trained local levies as far as possible from the rest of your army. So let's take a closer look at these military operations. In early September, Russian forces launched an assault on Novosibirsk from the south. If you think you've heard this before, it's because there are 35 settlements called Novosibirsk in Ukraine. 35! Not only is their food bland and unoriginal, the names of their settlements as well. The operation against Novosibirsk started with FAB bomb drops on the village, as well as on all the surrounding tree lines. Then came artillery strikes, shortly followed by swarms of drones taking out all the vehicles in the vicinity of the settlement. That was done to prevent any reinforcements or supplies to reach the village, and to isolate the garrison defending it. That way, Russian assault units would engage Ukrainian forces that were plagued by low morale and severe ammunition shortages. Additionally, Russian drones also targeted any strong points still held by enemy troops. As you can see, we're very far from the mythical human wave attacks. The Russians make heavy use of their firepower advantage, and only when the defenders are severely degraded do storm detachments come in. In the end, Ukrainian troops were effectively pinned down. Eventually, the hammer fell, and that's when the Siberian troops from the 36th Motor Rifle Brigade raised their colors on the village of Novosibirsk. Having consolidated positions in Novosibirsk, the Russian 36th Motor Rifle Brigade then launched an attack towards Uspenivka, following the same tactical scheme previously employed against Novosibirsk: FAB bombs, artillery strikes, and then drones. The Russian command then used the exact same tactics for every settlement they would encounter. For sure it takes time, but it saves manpower. For example, here we see how a Ukrainian tank was spotted by a Russian recon UAV, which then guides a fiber optics drone to backshot this T-72 as it aims to penetrate the tank's exhaust grill. However, the armored vehicle was not destroyed. That's when a second drone soon followed the trail of smoke and then successfully struck its target, which then immobilized the T-72. With very little fire support left, Ukrainian units from the territorial defense eventually withdrew. That's how the Russians captured Sosnivka on the 11th of September. The same day, 9 kilometers to the south, the Russian 37th Motor Rifle Brigade stormed the settlements of Ternove and Novomikhailivka, on which they raised the white-blue-red banner on the 13th of September. In this footage, you can also see what the landscape looks like: flat, open fields, as far as the eye can see. For the AFU, the debacle in that sector was total. Here we see some unfortunate Ukrainian soldiers running away as they get targeted by enemy drones. And from the footage I saw, Each village is not defended by more than a downsized platoon of 15 to 20 men. I can imagine the feeling of isolation of these troops. But that's not even the worst part. I barely saw Ukrainian drone strikes on advancing Russian units. This could suggest these territorial defense battalions are experiencing a critical shortage of drones and of trained drone operators. It's important to note that at the same time, Russian forces were also testing Ukrainian defenses by launching small-scale attacks against Chervone and out of Malinivka. Although these actions did not lead to breakthroughs, they pinned down considerable Ukrainian reserves around Huliaipole proper. But again, why would you launch a frontal offensive against Ukraine's fortified lines on Zaporizhia when you can just outflank them? 2 days later, on the 15th, it's the 114th Motor Rifle Regiment that captured Olivske. 48 hours later, it's Uspenivka that fell after an attack by the 394th Motor Rifle Regiment. As you can see here, it's all perfectly coordinated. Russian firepower destroyed the main defensive bastions, which are then mopped up by FPV drones. Then Russian stormtroopers advance in small groups inside the village, clearing one house after another by pelting grenades inside them. And finally, I saw some Ukrainian drone strikes, but even then, very limited. Then on the 20th, it's Berezove that fell, quickly followed by Kalinivske, which was captured by the Russian 5th Tank Brigade. And at the same time, they also launched an attack on Novokhyrovka. There was this Ukrainian T-72 ready to intervene, to knock out the Russians, but it was soon swarmed by FPV drones. I don't know if it's fully destroyed, but it looks pretty damaged to me. As you can see, there's no way these Ukrainian territorial defense brigades could effectively halt the Russian offensive. All they could attempt was to perhaps slow down the Russians until reinforcements come in. But yeah, they were suffering from terrible attrition doing so. Every village that fell meant an entire platoon was wiped out. From Kalinivske, the Russians advanced 5 kilometers all the way to Verbove, which they reached on the 28th of September. That's when 4 elements were targeted by Ukrainian bomber drones of the 110th Mechanized Brigade. That also explains the T-72 that was hit in that area. The reinforcements have arrived! The rapid intervention of elements of the 110th Mechanized Brigade reinvigorated the defense of that sector. They brought with them armored units that could counterattack and skilled drone operators, which soon hunted down enemy patrols. It's very ironic, isn't it? In 2023, the newly created 110th Mechanized Brigade was meant to spearhead the Ukrainian offensive against Russia's fortified line in Zaporizhia. And now, the tables have turned, as they have to prevent the same oblast from falling into enemy hands. Who would have thought, right?
All hope is failing, my lord!
The entire left flank of the Ukrainian Zaporizhia line was collapsing. Russian forces were effectively driving a wedge between Huliaipole and Pokrovsky in the north. Disclaimer, I'm talking about Pokrovsky and not Pokrovsk. Ukraine. It's like when you create a new password, you want to select something you can easily remember. So you take the original one and just add a random letter at the end. October 2025. By the 1st of October, the Ukrainian front rested along the Yanchur river and centered its defense on the settlement of Uspenivka. This line was really Ukraine's last barrier before Huliaipole. On October 1st, the Russian 37th Motor Rifle Brigade raised its colors on Verbove. But 2 days later, the Ukrainian 110th Mechanized Brigade counterattacked and knocked out the Russians from the settlement. In this telegram post, the 110th even stated, enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups infiltrated the settlement of Verbove to stage a flag-planting video, after which the occupiers were destroyed by our units. And then on the 5th of October, it's elements of the Ukrainian 154th Mechanized Brigade that showed up on the Russian right flank.
They now control a key position, my lord!
In response, Russian artillery immediately intervened and pummeled the entire sector. These Ukrainian reinforcements allowed an increasing number of drone strikes on advancing Russian forces. For the Ukrainian command, the objective was that for every step back, they would make the Russians pay by inflicting them as many casualties as possible. For example, here we see Russian troops take over Ukrainian trenches when they get targeted by enemy drones. Hope was slowly returning for the Ukrainian command in Huliaipole, but the battle for the Yanchur River took a dramatic turn on the 7th of October, when the 394th Motor Rifle Regiment advanced 4 kilometers and claimed the capture of Novovasilivske, the small hamlet that sits just in front of Uspenivka.
Into the breach! Retreat!
24 hours later, it's Novokhrikhovka that fell. Here we can see how the combined work of the 394th Motor Rifle Regiment and 60th Motor Rifle Brigade cleared the place from the last Ukrainian holdouts. Oh yeah, there was also this other video I wanted to show you from Novokhrikhovka as well. In this footage, in a very risky humanitarian mission, we see Ukrainian infantrymen evacuating the last civilians of that village. During the battle for this settlement, we see a Russian soldier from the 60th Brigade. He hears Ukrainian soldiers inside this house, slowly approaches and throws a grenade through the window. Allegedly, 2 Ukrainians were KIA from the explosion. Then the Russian soldier takes refuge in some basement. Sometime later, we see 3 Ukrainian soldiers attempting a run for it to reach friendly lines. Unfortunately, they barely escape from the compound that they get gunned down. Not only that, but they're not KIA, they're wounded on the ground. And that's when Russian bomber drones just finished them off. No mercy was given at all. I don't know about you, but this video took me multiple times to go through. You know, many Ukrainians message me talking about how their father's uncle, relatives have been mobilized. And I just think this could be one of them. Sacrificed to defend a place that nobody would even be able to point on a map. Anyway, let's continue. After a week-long tactical pause that allowed Russian troops to refill on ammo and borscht, fighting restarted around Uspenivka. Russian patrols started by infiltrating Ukrainian positions by creeping their way into the settlement. Here we see a lone Russian soldier taking position inside this house, but he's then targeted by multiple FPV drones. He actually survived the initial strikes, but then he's seriously injured and with his head buzzing, he exposed himself to another FPV drone. This is something I've heard a lot. Russian officers will tell one of their soldiers, okay, you go, you advance 500 meters in this direction, you hold this house, and when you get there, radio back to the command post, and we'll send you someone else. And the thing is, Russian soldiers don't even question these orders. They're like, okay, I'll go. And by spreading out their forces like that, it's very hard for Ukrainian recon drones to spot enemy units. All this to say that if you see one lone Russian soldier that got hit, there are probably another 9 that got through. Meanwhile, the Russians made use of their firepower to soften Ukrainian defenses. Here we see the destructive impact of an FAB-3000. Whereas in this footage, we see 3 Ukrainian soldiers moving down a tree line. Or actually, wait, hold on, there's more. 4, 5, and 6. They seem to be part of a rotation going down into an underground dugout. That's when an artillery shell strikes them with extreme precision. Like for the other videos, there's parts I can't show you. But in this one, we only see a single Ukrainian soldier running away from these trenches. When you see videos like that, sometimes you understand why the Ukrainian command does not even bother providing months and months of training to its troops.
Hey, yo, what the?
On the 17th of October, the 37th Motor Rifle Brigade advanced 6 kilometers and raised the Russian flag on Privilia. The entire Ukrainian defense line along the Yanchur River was getting taken into a pincer. It's not a surprise that the General Staff of the AFU hastily dispatched the 142nd Mechanized Brigade and the 3rd Mechanized Battalion of the Presidential Brigade. However, these reinforcements arrived too late. On the 19th of October, after a real storm of steel, Russian assault detachments of the 57th Motor Rifle Brigade swarmed into Poltavka, the settlement just south of Uspenivka, and at the same time, north of Uspenivka, the Russians pushed against the hamlet of Zlahoda. By the 22nd, the claws tightened on Uspenivka as the 60th Motor Rifle Brigade attacked Pavlivka. First, the Russians detonated the bridge over the Yanchur River, and once the settlement was isolated, they launched the final assault. Meanwhile, Ukrainian reserves kilometers to the rear were suppressed by Russian artillery. 48 hours later, on the 24th, Zlahoda was secured by the Storm Detachment of the 64th Guards Brigade. That's when the Russian commanders of the 5th Command Arms Army carried out a double envelopment of Uspenivka. First, the 60th Motor Rifle Brigade attacked along the Yanchur River and captured Privilne. Simultaneously, a second group attacked south of Uspenivka. This was a difficult maneuver because the settlement of Novomykolaivka was heavily defended, and it also benefited from the natural barrier of the Yanchur River. However, while being protected by a rolling barrage, Russian storm detachments crossed the river and captured the settlement. That's only when the Russian command launched Phase 3 and pushed in the center, which allowed the 5th Army to gain a foothold inside Uspenivka. While Uspenivka was about to get pounded like a college girl on spring break, The Russian 36th Motor Rifle Brigade claimed the capture of Uspenivka on the 29th of October. As you can see, the road to Pokrovsky was open, and for that matter, the road to all of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast as well. November 2025. By November 1st, the Russian 5th Combined Arms Army was about to break through the Yanchur River. This was the last Ukrainian defensive line to break through before the final offensive on Huliaipole, located only 16 kilometers further. To make matters even worse, Russian aviation was already striking Ukraine's main supply line along the TO401 road. The next day, Ukrainian recon drones spotted an increasing number of enemy rifle teams infiltrating into Uspenivka. The coup de grâce was given on the 5th of November, when the stormtroopers of the 127th Motor Rifle Division breached into the village. Within a few hours, Ukrainian resistance collapsed. And that's how men of the 218th Tank Regiment claimed the full capture of the stronghold of Uspenivka. This was a complete disaster because not only 48 hours later, Russian spearheads of the 127th Division were already pushing against Solotke, Nove, and Novouspenivka. To secure the right flank of this forward push, the 37th Motor Rifle Brigade crossed the Yanchur River and pushed into Ribne. During this battle, we see a fiber optics drone crashing in on 4 Ukrainian soldiers as they disembark from quads. But they were lucky, the drone missed its target. However, check this out. Look at all the supplies these quads were transporting. I guess that's how it's done nowadays, right? Even pickup trucks are too vulnerable. On the 8th of November, Russian units from the 394th Regiment reached Solotke. Simultaneously, the 114th Motor Rifle Regiment struck Nove and mopped up Novouspenivka. Even worse, detachments from the 127th Division even managed to approach Rivnopilia, 6 kilometers west from Uspenivka. By the 11th of November, the spearheads of the 127th Division were only 8 kilometers away from the first houses of Huliaipole. After 5 days of fighting, it's Rivnopilia that fell on the 12th of November. Russian forces in that sector never advanced as fast as they do now. And for the first time, Deep State UA announced the fall of a settlement before Russian reports, as it's only on the 16th of November that the 114th Regiment claimed the capture of Rivnopilia. It's also important to mention that not far from there, on the 15th of November, we have visual evidence that Russian soldiers executed 2 Ukrainian prisoners. It's horrible and it's really counterproductive. Ukrainian soldiers will see things like that and they will prefer to fight until the very end than to lay down their weapons. With that being said, from what I saw in this war, what we just saw is typically done to drone operators, which, as you may be aware of, show no mercy on the battlefield. So in return, when they get caught, yeah. And according to the latest news, reports indicate the presence of a large number of Colombian and Peruvian foreign fighters around Huliaipole in an attempt to plug the gaps. What can we expect next? Well, Russian forces have already reached Danilivka, meaning Ukraine's TO401 supply road is effectively cut off. Now it's definitely problematic, but there's still smaller roads that are still open. Now as for Huliaipole proper, I don't know what the Ukrainians can do. The town is currently defended by 3 territorial defense battalions, most likely under strength battalions. We're looking at flat open terrain with only a handful of large buildings at the center of the town. And of course, there's this cauldron. It's not looking good. Right now, forward elements of the 5th Combined Arms Army are less than 5 kilometers away from the first houses of the town. We can expect enemy forces to push along the main road, which in turn will force Ukrainian formations to abandon Zeleny High and Chervone. From this moment on, there are 2 options. Option 1, we can expect Russian storm detachments to launch a frontal assault on Huliaipole, just like they did in Uspenivka. This main effort could be supported by offensive actions from the south along these 2 axes. I think that's what the Russians will try to do first, especially if they feel that Ukrainian defense is collapsing in this sector. Option 2, Russian push westward towards the Yanchur River and simply bypass the defensive node of Huliaipole. In other words, put the city inside a cauldron. We can expect this option if the Ukraine command immediately sends reinforcements to hold the town. Overall, the loss of a strong point like Huliaipole would severely compromise the defense of Zaporizhia Oblast for Ukraine, as it is the largest town in a 35-kilometer radius. That's all I have for you today. Remember to check out Outskill, Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.